Hey everyone, it's 101 Leafy bringing you a guide to the Crank-a-Kai from MountWildwood.net. The Wibble Wobble Crank-a-Kai may seem completely random at first. Most people who have played Wibble Wobble will agree that cranking can be a frustrating experience due to it seemingly being completely up to luck. However, there are ways to manipulate what the crank gives. Doing so requires an understanding of how the Crank-a-Kai works. Unlike cranks in the 3DS games, cranks in Wibble Wobble are not predetermined. Due to the constant updates in Wibble Wobble's Crank-a-Kai from new events and updates, this would be impossible. As a result, Wibble Wobble has a way of determining what a crank gives the moment it is performed. The process of result determination will be referred to as rolling because the reliance on random numbers for a result is akin to rolling a dice. The crank system was created in a specific way to make adding and subtracting yokai from the crank's pool, or set of available yokai, an easy task. Instead of each yokai having an individual probability of being cranked, there are set tiers of rarity. Certain yokai are placed in each tier, with higher ranks being rarer than lower ones, with a few exceptions. While NHN has neglected to give any official response on rarities, they have been estimated to be as follows. The rarest tier, Tier 0, consists entirely of Wismellow Man. No yokai has been added to the game that is as rare as him. The next tier, Tier 1, has Jibanyan S, Komasan S, and Illuminact. Jibanyan S and Komasan S are the only yokai that are rarer than Soul Secrets, which are at Tier 2. Then, there are the S-rank Legend Seal yokai at Tier 3. Cruncha, Pepion, Demuncher, Swalterior, King Mara, and, in addition to these Seal yokai, Event S-ranks are at this rarity tier as well. Next is Tier 4, with Snartle, Kyubi, and Venoct. Despite their lower ranks, Jibanyan and Komasan A are both at this rarity. Then, at Tier 5, we have Eterna, Demona, and Sandy. These are the most common S ranks. Next, at Tier 6, we have the Seal yokai that are A ranked, Skreek, and Insomni. Note that the Seal yokai are always the rarest yokai out of their ranks. A-rank yokai distributed through events such as Mimikin A and Libertynyan seem to be around this rarity as well. Then, at Tier 7, we have Miracle, Mama Aura, and Cerberus. After them at Tier 8 are Zero, Bruff, and Cut and Cheese. Finally, for A-ranks, Slitheref and Timidevil are at Tier 9. The rarest B-rank yokai, Thornyan and Batinyan, are at Tier 10, with Garuma, Rhinogon, Contrarioni, and Beetler following up at Tier 11. Finally, the most common yokai in all of the Crank-a-Kai have been confirmed by community manager Carlos to be Copperlead, Psynake, and Elu at Tier 12. There is a 13th tier of rarity, but so far it has only been accessible through events. The C-rank Buchinyan and the D-rank Mimikin D are far more common than even Tier 12 yokai. When cranking, there are 4 possible capsule colors you can get. The color you get is partially determined by the rarity tier of your crank and partially up to luck. A blue capsule, which is preceded by a blue whisper background, only yields yokai of Tier 10 or lower. A background can give a yokai of any tier, a Mega X-Borb, or a Holy X-Borb. A gold capsule and whisper background can give a Tier 9 or above yokai or a Holy X-Borb. Finally, a black capsule, which drops before whisper appears with a gold background, will always give a yokai of Tier 5 or above. I personally got my only Illuminac from a red capsule, so don't get disappointed until you see what's inside. Altogether, there appear to be 13 rarity tiers in the current Crank-a-Kai. However, this is all speculation. Crank results are, of course, still left up to chance, so it is difficult to tell the exact rarity of a yokai. Once a crank is initiated, the game begins rolling to decide the result. The rolling process consists of multiple rolls, from 13 to 15, depending on if there are any Tier 0 or Tier 13 yokai available in the crank. The game begins its first roll for the lowest rarity available. At the beginning of the game, this will be Tier 12, which is confirmed to contain Copperlead, Psynake, and Elu. A roll has 3 possible outcomes: proceed, stop, and fail. The simplest of these results is the stop result. If a stop is rolled, the current rarity tier is decided as the results. A final roll is then performed to determine which yokai out of that rarity tier will be pulled. The probability of each yokai in a tier being pulled is equal. For example, in the current Crank-a-Kai, if the result of the first rarity roll is a stop, the game chooses Tier 12 as the rarity of the cranked yokai. Then, it performs a final roll to decide whether Elu, Psynake, or Copperlead is pulled. All 3 of them have an equal 33% chance of being chosen, regardless of Soultimate level. While the previous example considered the first roll as a stop, there are 2 other possibilities it could be: proceed and fail. If the result of a roll on tier 12 is proceed, the game then performs another roll for tier 11. If that roll's result is proceed, a roll is performed for tier 10, and so on until the final tier is reached. Currently, that tier is tier 1, but during the Halloween event, Wismellow Man was in his own rarity tier. Even players with a completely maxed Crank-a-Kai needed to crank hundreds of times to pull him once. If a tier is the highest possible, such as tier 1 in the current Crank-a-Kai, it loses the proceed possibility. Only stop and fail are possible results of the penultimate roll. Failure is always a possibility for any roll except the final one, and a failed roll causes an X-Borb to be cranked. Before this can happen, a final roll must be performed. Unlike yokai, Mega X-Borbs and Holy X-Borbs have different probabilities of being cranked. Mega X-Borbs have around an 8.5% bigger chance of being pulled than Holy X-Borbs, but the exact probabilities of pulling either are unknown. As the rarity of a pull increases, the chance of the next roll being a fail increases as well. This causes the chance of the next roll being a stop or proceed to decrease. While this may seem to make pulling high-rank yokai an impossible task, there is a way to manipulate these odds. When 35 of the same yokai have been befriended, that yokai's ultimate level advances to level 7. This process is simply referred to as maxing a yokai because the game ditches EXP count in favor of a simple max on the EXP bar once ultimate level 7 has been reached. A yokai's ultimate level cannot be increased past level 7. This means they cannot be befriended anymore. When all yokai available in the Crank-a-Kai have been maxed, the player has a maxed Crank-a-Kai. Here you can see a list of all non-event yokai available in the Crank-a-Kai. Even if you didn't pull a single X-Borb, it would still cost you a total of 3,570,000 Y money to max out the Crank-a-Kai. If a yokai cannot be befriended, this also means they cannot be cranked, which gives maxing a yokai one of two results. If there are other yokai in its rarity tier that are not maxed, the chance of pulling them increases during a stop roll on that tier. For example, if only Psynake is maxed and the tier 12 roll is a stop, then Elu and Copperlead both have a 50% chance of being pulled rather than the 33% chance they had when Psynake was able to be pulled as well. If there are no other yokai in the newly maxed yokai's rarity tier, that tier no longer gets a roll. If Elu, Psynake, and Copperlead are all maxed, then the first roll performed during a crank is for tier 11. While Thornyan and Badignon have very low initial chances of being pulled at first, maxing all tier 12 and 11 yokai makes pulling them an easy task. There is one other catch to the rarity of a yokai. If a yokai that is a legend seal is pulled, they drop down to the next most common tier. Although Pepion is one of the most rare yokai in the game, he becomes as common as QB after being pulled once. This makes maxing Snartle and Venoct a much more frustrating experience given how useful they are compared to QB and Pepion. The end goal of maxing the Crank-a-Kai is to pull Soul Secrets. While it may be tempting to fuse a newly pulled Jibanyan A or Komasan A into a more powerful S-ranked version, this is actually a poor idea. The S-ranked versions of them are more rare than Soul Secrets, meaning they have no effect on the probability of pulling a Soul Secrets, because the probability of passing the tier 2 roll is replaced entirely by failure possibilities once Jibanyan S and Komasan S are maxed. Once all yokai at tiers 3 and below are maxed, the probability of pulling a Soul Secrets has been determined to be a concrete 10%. This only changes during double chance events. When these events take place, the chance of that rarities tier roll being a stop seems to double, decreasing the chance of failure. This can be seen most clearly when players with a maxed crank perform Y money cranks during the 2x Soul Secret chance events. They end up pulling Soul Secrets around 20% of the time. Only one other exact percentage is known. With a maxed Crank-a-Kai, the yokai Illuminact has a 1.5% chance of being pulled. While Dark QB was found to be exactly as common as the Seal Yokai Demuncher by Springdale Data Sciences member Robet, Illuminact stands out as being exceptionally rare for an event S rank. When asked about Robet's calculated 1.5% chance of pulling Illuminact, community manager Carlos said that it sounds about right because NHN uses that probability for pulls of a similar rarity in their other games. Players looking to pull higher ranked yokai may be tempted to try to befriend yokai at the lowest rarity tier they have available in their cranks, but this is not beneficial. Befriending any yokai in the Crank-a-Kai can be valued at exactly 3,000 Y money. Yokai of ranks B and above have vastly decreased chances of being befriended. These yokai require many clearings of their stages to be befriended a single time, even with food, but using food would decrease profit further. The Crank-a-Kai can be maxed much faster by buckling down and grinding Y money, even though it may feel less productive. Crank-a-Kai coins work exactly the same way as Y-Money cranks, but they have different pools of yokai to pull from. They generally follow the same rules. Yokai with higher ranks have higher rarities, with fan popularity playing a small role in the cases of the Nyans and Komas. In the case of Crank-a-Kai coins, which have some unique pulls such as Casanova, maxing every other yokai in them to guarantee a certain pull actually is a great idea. Take, for example, Casanova, who cannot be befriended by normal means. He's only available through a mission reward. While he's not very useful due to the way that befriending works, players looking to max him anyway should turn to the Cheerful coin. After maxing every other yokai available in it, every Cheerful coin will give out a Casanova. This can be applied to other coins to get similarly rare yokai. In conclusion, there is unfortunately little strategy in relation to trying to pull a certain yokai from the Crank-a-Kai. However, it boosts morale to know that pulling 35 Beetler is not as useless as it seems. Although it may seem like a waste of Y money at first, having the ability to pull any new event yokai such as QB Awoken and just a few cranks in the near future makes the constant Garuma a little less painful. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what yokai do you want to pull from the Crank-a-Kai the most? If you like my content, be sure to check out my website, mountwildwood.net, where I post Yokai Watch news and guides like these, as well as analysis of Wibble Wobble updates and events.